Well, Minister, I think you told me the last time I asked you a fairly similar question on dog breeding establishments and the inspection of them and the welfare of the dogs. You told me, in fact, that the guidelines, I think, were being published last year following long consultation, and that they'd come into effect in January 2019. You told me, in fact, I think last time that there were 248 breeding establishments, registered establishments in 2016, 258 in 2017. So I'll just ask the Minister, what's the up-to-date positions on the guidelines, Minister, and on the number of establishments now?
Thank you, Deputy, for the question. And each year the Department publishes the stats covering a range of dog control responsibilities of the local authorities. These include stats in respect of their work on the dog breeding establishments. Local authorities are responsible for the registration, inspection and issuing fixed payment notices or improvement notices in relation to these establishments. Stats for 2018 are currently being collected from each of the local authorities, and when checked and verified they will be published on the Department's website. I plan to publish the 2018 stats by the end of June of this year. Similarly, stats for 2019 will be published when available in 2020. The stats for 2017 and earlier years are available on the Department's website. At the end of 2017, there were 258 dog breeding establishments registered. Approximately one-third of these were commercial establishments, with the remainder including boarding kennels, animal welfare shelters and hunt clubs. 275 inspections were carried out in total in 2017, with 4 improvement notices and 2 fixed payment notices issued. And further information on them stats are available on the Department's website as well.
Well, Minister, I welcome the fact that you're publishing the 2018 stats in June. But how many people have been prosecuted and convicted for breaches of the 2010 Dog Breeding Establishments Act to date? Your 2017 figures showed there were 2,176 on-the-spot fines issued under the Control of Dogs Act, and 766 of those were paid, 191 prosecutions, 99 convictions. What happened to the remainder of those fines? Minister, we still obviously get incredible horror stories, a number of them coming before the courts. We had the incident a few years ago there, I think, in Roscommon, and then very recently, a few months ago, I think it was a registered establishment. We had somebody prosecuted and committed to prison, I think, for a number of years for gross cruelty, and being banned for life from having dogs and horses. So do we not need a much more vigorous regime, Minister? And I know I asked yourself and Minister Ring this area before, that it's very unusual that you have 3 government departments regulating it yourselves. You're responsible for the 2010 Act, Department of Agriculture, and obviously the Department of the Environment. So is there some area that we could move forward on that so that we can have better invigilation of these establishments?
We have another minute. Minister, 1 minute. Deputy, you're right, and actually only last Monday week I visited an animal shelter down in Tipperary. On my way back from Tralee from the AAC task force meeting, and you know, when you meet the people who are taking care of the welfare of animals, and you realise what actually is happening, and I think it was a first-hand experience for me. Even though I'm from rural Ireland, we love our dogs, we love our pets, and it's not just dogs; it's more than that. But I would say to you that the legislation as well is being reviewed. The guidelines came in on the 1st of January, but the department are actually. Many comments were received during the consultation process on the guidelines, and they could not be addressed within the guidelines. And I think that the comments that were being made necessitate my department to look at the legislation, and that's what we're doing at the moment. So the department will consider these submissions that were made in the context of looking at the legislation. Many respondents suggested changing the definition of the dog breed establishment to refer to 3 rather than 6 breeding bitches, for instance. Others mentioned that the current definition covers hunt clubs, etc., and this may not be appropriate, and the concept of offences for non-compliance was mentioned by respondents. There is a plethora of submissions which are very, very good and very, very important. The guidelines we wouldn't be able to cover in the guidelines. So we're looking at the legislation, and we hope to have the legislation process ready to bring into the Chamber before the end of 2019.
Deputy Broughan, 1 minute.
And thanks to the Minister for his thoughtful reply. And Minister, when you returned to government, you said that you made a commitment that you would meet animal rights advocates and representative advocacy groups. And is that a commitment that you've already met, or something that you intend to? And I know you've been listening, obviously, to the submissions. I know that Section 9 of the 2010 Act it provides for the registration, of course, of the establishments of the breeders. And you made an interesting point there about the number of dogs breeding dogs that should be registered. But I mean, what about those who are, they're operating under the radar, as you said yourself, and I have a rural background myself, so I totally understand the concerns that people have for indeed all farm animals and companion animals. And I know there's a provision now for unannounced inspections, but there's still, given the cases that have come before the courts, there's still grave concern, and also, of course, the worrying reports we get about our export. We export so many dogs to the UK, and I don't know whether you've had any liaison with Minister Gove in the Department of Environment over there. He said he was going to introduce some new legislation in that regard. And just a final point, obviously, Dogs Trust, a distinguished advocacy group, they were saying in February this year that they received requests from nearly 400 people looking to surrender the dogs after Christmas. Any measures you can take in relation to that, of people buying dogs for children and so on, and then surrendering them within a week or two? Thanks, Seán.
Minister.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I suppose first thing to say to you that Deputy Maureen Sullivan brought in a number of people who are involved in this area, and I met with them, and I must say that the meeting I had with them was one of the more positive meetings I've had in a long time, in the sense that they had very fundamental issues that they wanted to see addressed, and they were there to help and to do that. So I've given them a commitment that, and following on from that, I visited Tipperary. We have, it is a problem. There's lots of things that are not right. There is the sale of pups online, which I myself I'm not happy with. So we have to look at all of that. We have to look at it in the context of legislation, and I think we will do that. We're working on that at the moment. But again, to reiterate, you mentioned about the surrendering of dogs, we say January, February, March, and I would say to anybody who's thinking about buying a dog for Christmas or for a birthday or whatever, to ensure first of all that there's a place for the dog, that there's socialisation for the dog, and that the dog isn't locked up all day. And that's actually cruelty in its own way. But we have a lot of dogs in this country. The licensing of dogs and the chipping of dogs, all of that type of thing, is a huge area that we're looking at within the legislation.